Hey everyone, it's Lynnea for LDRS Creative, and today I'm going to be making a card with the orchid stamp and die set from the latest Spring 2022 collection. Now this card is a little bit different in size because I kind of, as I was creating, changed my mind. So hang in with me until the end and you'll see what I mean. So here's the orchid stamp set, and then I'm also grabbing a couple colors of hybrid ink. I have Grape Ape and Four Leaf, so a purple color and a green color. I'm working on a piece of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch watercolor cardstock by LDRS Creative, and I have some just post-it notes, but you can use masking tape, whatever you have, just to mask off the bottom leaf portion of this orchid stamp. I just want to stamp the flowers right now, and I'm using that Grape Ape hybrid ink to do so. My ink pad is just a little bit dry, and I want to make sure that I get a lot of ink onto my cardstock panel. I want this to be a pretty saturated color, so I'm going to replace those post-it notes, ink this up again, and stamp it again. And again, I'm using my stamp pendable to get nice even pressure. I'm going to switch out my post-it notes so that they are nice and clean and they won't transfer any ink onto my green ink pad. And I'm going to mask off the top of that orchid, so the flower portion, and I'm going to ink up the leafy portion with the 4-leaf ink. Make sure that you remember to remove your post-it notes or whatever you're using for masking before you stamp, because any ink that's on that post-it note will stamp onto your cardstock. Trust me, I had to do this twice because I messed up. So now that I have that image stamped in 2 colors of ink, I'm taking those same colors, and these are hybrid inks from LDRS Creative. So I've smushed that down onto my glass work surface, and rather than spraying these down with water, which is what I would normally use to color with, I'm spraying some alcohol, and I just have 91% isopropyl alcohol, whatever you would get in your local drugstore in the first aid section. And I just keep some in a little spray bottle. I actually use it all over my craft desk to clean up my craft mat. If I have glue anywhere or something, that's what I use to clean. So I have that in a little spray bottle, and I'm just using those same inks. So the Grape Ape, and here's the 4-leaf, and I'm using this to color. Now this might take a little bit of getting used to because it's not going to move like watercolor does. Watercolor moves quite freely, but this ink is not really meant to color with. But with this little hack of coloring with alcohol, you can definitely trick your ink into thinking it's going to move like a watercolor, but you do have to work a little bit quicker. I sped that video up so I wasn't going quite that fast, but it was really easy to do, and I love how this results in this kind of no line-ish technique because I have stamped in the same color that I was using to do my coloring with. I used the orchid coordinating dies to cut out that orchid, and now I'm going to work on my background. I could have used a piece of pattern paper, but I really wanted my coloring to be the focal point. I wanted that to be the portion that's going to stand out the most. So I decided instead to create my own background, and I'm using this cute little flower sprig from that same orchid stamp set, and I'm stamping with alloy ink. And I'm just going to be stamping and picking this up and moving this all around and creating my own background paper. I'm making sure to move my stamp and kind of rotate it to make sure that it has that random look. I'm going to stamp my sentiment right onto this piece. So I'm just putting this into my stamping positioner, and I have a little grid on top to make sure that I stamp this straight because I am not good at stamping a straight sentiment, which is why you hardly ever see me stamping directly onto my card base because it's never straight. But this time I was going to take the chance, and I got pretty lucky, and it looks good to me. I stamped it with Raven Hybrid ink, and again, this is a hybrid ink, so it's that combination of a pigment and a dye ink, and that pigment quality lets me use some clear embossing powder on here. It stays wet for just a little bit, so I put that on and then heat set that, and I just like how that makes that sentiment nice and shiny. I wanted to add just a tiny bit of color to my background, so I have some purple shimmer watercolor that I watered down and then just used my brush and spattered that onto the background. Here's another good thing about heat embossing my sentiment any watercolor that ended up on top, I can just pick up with a cloth because that heat embossing will resist that. Now here's where, as I was building my card, I thought that it just needed to be a little bit bigger. So I cut a mat for my cardstock. So this is 1/4 of an inch bigger. So this piece is going to be 4.5 by 5 3/4. And I used my alloy ink and just kind of ran that around all 4 sides to create a mat that was going to perfectly match my stamping in the background. And then I cut my card base to be 1/4 of an inch bigger than that. So my finished card size is 1/2 an inch bigger than an A2 card. So my finished card is 6 inches by 4 3/4 inches. So it's bigger than an A2 card, but not quite as big as a 5 by 7. So it's a little bit wonky, but in the end, I like how the design came out. And just having a regular A2 size wasn't quite big enough, but I didn't want to go for a full 5 by 7. So here is a uniquely sized card. And that's it. Everything is put together with some foam tape to finish it off with nice dimension. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I have listed and linked all of the LDRS Creative products that I used in my video description below, and I'll see you soon. Bye!